The Untouchables. Who were they and why they became untouchables? By Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Part 6, Chapter 16, 2. Was there untouchability in the time of Manu? This question cannot be answered offhand. There is a passage in which he says that there are only four varnas and that there is no fifth varna. The passage is enigmatical. It is difficult to make out what it means. Quite obviously, the statement by Manu is an attempt by him to settle a controversy that must have been going on at the time he wrote. Quite obviously, the controversy was about the status of a certain class in relation to the system of Chaturvarna. Equally obvious is the point which was the center of this controversy. To put it briefly, the point was whether this class was to be deemed to be included within the Chaturvarna or whether it was a fifth Varna, quite distinct from the original four Varnas. All this is quite clear. What is, however, not clear is the class to which it refers. This is because Manu makes no specific mention of the class involved in the controversy. The verse is also enigmatical because of the ambiguity in the decision given by Manu. Manu's decision is that there is no fifth Varna. As a general proposition, it has a meaning which everybody can understand. But what does this decision mean in the concrete application to the class whose status was the subject matter of controversy? Obviously, it is capable of two interpretations. It means that, as according to the scheme of Chaturvarna, that there is no fifth Varna, the class in question must be deemed to belong to one of the four recognized Varnas. But it may also mean that, as in the original Varna system, there is no provision for a fifth class, the class in question must be deemed to be outside the Varna system altogether. The traditional interpretation adopted by the Orthodox Hindu is that the statement in Manu refers to the untouchables and that it was that the untouchables whose status was in controversy and that it was their status which is the subject matter of Manu's decision. This interpretation is so firmly established that it has given rise to a division of Hindus into two classes called by different names. Savarnas or Hindus, those included in the Chaturvarnas, and Avarnas or untouchables, those excluded from the Chaturvarna. The question is this view correct? To whom does the text refer? Does it refer to the untouchables? A discussion of this question may appear to be out of place and remote from the question under consideration, but it is not so. For if the text does refer to the untouchables, then it follows that untouchability did exist in the time of Manu, a conclusion which touches the very heart of the question under consideration. The matter must therefore be thrashed out. I am sure this interpretation is wrong. I hold that the passage does not refer to the untouchables at all. Manu does not say which was the fifth class whose status was in controversy and about whose status he has given a decision in this passage. Was it the class of untouchables or was it some other class? In support of my conclusion that the passage does not refer to untouchables at all, I rely on two circumstances. In the first place, there was no untouchability in the time of Manu. There was only impurity. Even the Chandal, for whom Manu has nothing but contempt, is only an impure person. That being so, this passage cannot possibly have any reference to the untouchables. In the second place, there is evidence to support the view that this passage has reference to slaves and not to untouchables. This view is based on the language of the passage quoted from the Narada Smriti in the chapter on the occupational theory of untouchability. It will be noticed that the Narada Smriti speaks of the slaves as the fifth class. If the expression fifth class in the Narada Smriti refers to slaves, I see no reason why the expression fifth class in Manu Smriti should not be taken to have reference to slaves. If this reasoning is correct, it cuts at the very root of the contention that untouchability existed in the time of Manu and that Manu was not prepared to include them as part of the Varna system. For the reason stated, the passage does not refer to untouchability, and there is therefore no reason to conclude that there was untouchability in the time of Manu. Thus, we can be sure of fixing the upper limit for the date of the birth of untouchability. We can definitely say that Manusmriti did not enjoin untouchability. There, however, remains one important question. What is the date of the Manusmriti? Without an answer to this question, it would not be possible for the average to relate the existence or non-existence of untouchability to any particular point in time. There is no unanimity among savants regarding the date of the Manusmriti. Some regard it as very ancient and some regard it as very recent. After taking all facts into consideration, Professor Bueller has fixed a date which appears to strike the truth. According to Bueller, Manusmriti, in the shape in which it exists now, came into existence in the 2nd century AD. And in assigning so recent a date to the Manusmriti, Professor Bueller is not quite alone. Mr. Daftari has also come to the same conclusion. According to him, Manusmriti came into being after the year 185 BC and not before. The reason given by Mr. Daftari is that Manusmriti has a close connection with the murder of the Buddhist emperor Brihadrata of the Maurya dynasty by his Brahmin commander-in-chief Pushyamitra Sangha, and as even that took place in 185 BC, he concludes that the Manusmriti must have been written after this period. To give support to so important a conclusion, it is necessary to establish a nexus between the murder of Brihadrata Maurya by Pushyamitra and the writing of Manusmriti by strong and convincing evidence. Mr. Daftari has unfortunately omitted to do so. Consequently, his conclusion appears to hang in the air. The establishment of such a nexus is absolutely essential. Fortunately, there is no want of evidence for the purpose. The murder of Brihadrata Maurya by Pushyamitra has unfortunately passed unnoticed. At any rate, it has not received the attention it deserves. It is treated by historians as an ordinary incident between two individuals, as though its origin lay in some personal quarrel between the two. Having regard to its consequences, it was an epoch making event. Its significance cannot be measured by treating it as a change of dynasty, the Sanghas succeeding the Mauryas. It was a political revolution as great as the French Revolution, if not greater. It was a revolution, a bloody revolution engineered by the Brahmins to overthrow the rule of the Buddhist kings. That is what the murder of Brihadrata by Pushyamitra means. This triumphant Brahmanism was in need of many things. It, of course, needed to make Chaturvarna the law of the land, the validity of which was denied by the Buddhists. It needed to make animal sacrifice, which was abolished by the Buddhists, legal. But it needed more. Brahmanism, in bringing about this revolution against the rule of the Buddhist kings, had transgressed two rules of the customary law of the land which were accepted by all as sacrosanct and inviolable. The first rule made it a sin for a Brahmin even to touch a weapon. The second made the king's person sacred and regicide a sin. Triumphant Brahmanism wanted a sacred text infallible in its authority to justify their transgressions. A striking feature of the Manusmriti is that it not only makes Chaturvarna the law of the land, it not only makes animal sacrifice legal, but it goes to state when a Brahmin could justifiably resort to arms and when he could justifiably kill the king. In this, the Manusmriti has done what no prior Smriti has done. It is a complete departure. It is a new thesis. Why should the Manusmriti do this? The only reason is it had to strengthen the revolutionary deeds committed by Pushyamitra by propounding philosophical justification. This interconnection between Pushyamrita and the new thesis propounded by Manu shows that the Manusmriti came into being sometime after 185 BC, a date not far removed from the date assigned by Professor Bueller. Having got a date of the Manusmriti, we can say that in the 2nd century AD there was no untouchability. Now to turn to the possibility of determining the lower limit to the birth of untouchability. For this, we must go to the Chinese travelers who are known to have visited India and placed on record what they saw of the modes and manners of the Indian people. Of these Chinese travelers, Fa Hian has something very interesting to say. He came to India in 400 AD. In the course of his observations occurred the following passages. Southward from this, Mathura, is the so-called middle country, Madhya Desha. The climate of this country is warm and equable without frost or snow. The people are very well off without poll tax or official restrictions. Only those who till the royal lands return a portion of the profit of the land. If they desire to go, they go. If they like to stop, they stop. The kings govern without corporal punishment. Criminals are fined according to circumstances, lightly or heavily. Even in cases of repeated rebellion, they only cut off the right hand. The king's personal attendants who guard him on the right and left have fixed salaries. Throughout the country, the people kill no living thing nor drink wine, nor do they eat garlic or onion with the exception of Chandals only. The Chandals are named evil men and dwell apart from the others. If they enter a town or market, they sound a piece of wood in order to separate themselves. Then, men, knowing they are, avoid coming in contact with them. In this country, they do not keep swine or fowls and do not deal in cattle. They have no shambles or wine shops in their marketplaces. In selling, they use cowrie shells. The Chandals only hunt and sell flesh. Can this passage be taken as evidence of the prevalence of untouchability of the term of Fahyan? Certain parts of his description of the treatment given to the Chandals do seem to lend support to the conclusion that is a case of untouchability. There is, however, one difficulty in the way of accepting this conclusion. The difficulty arises because the facts relate to the Chandals. The Chandal is not a ghost case to determine the existence or non existence of untouchability. The Brahmins have regarded the Chandals as their hereditary enemies and are prone to attribute to them abominable conduct, hurl at them low epithets, and manufacture towards them a mode of behavior which is utterly artificial to suit their venom against them. Whatever, therefore, is said against the Chandals must be taken with considerable reservations. This argument is not based on mere speculation. Those who doubt its cogency may consider the evidence of Bana's Kadambari for a different description of the treatment according to the Chandals. The story of Kadambari is a very complex one and we are not really concerned with it. It is enough for our purpose to note that the story is told to King Shudraka by a parrot named Vaishampayana, who was the pet of a Chandal girl. The following passages from the Kadambari are important for our purpose. It is better to begin with the Bana's description of a Chandal settlement. It is in the following term. I beheld the barbarian settlement, a very marketplace of evil deeds. It was surrounded on all sides by boys engaged in the chase, unleashing their hounds, teaching their falcons, mending snares, carrying weapons, and fishing, horrible in their attire, like demoniacs. Here and there, the entrance to their dwellings, hidden by thick bamboo forests, was to be inferred from the rising of smoke of orpiment. On all sides, the enclosures were made with skulls. The dust heaps on the roads were filled with bones. The yards of the huts were miry with blood, fat, and meat chopped up. The life there consisted of hunting, the food of flesh, the ointment of fat, the garments of coarse silk, the couches of dried skins, the household attendance of dogs, the animals for riding of cows, the men's employment of wine and women, the oblation to the gods of blood, the sacrifice of cattle. The place was the image of all hells. It is from such a settlement that the Chandal girl starts with her parrot to the palace of King Shudraka. King Shudraka is sitting in the hall of audience with his chieftains. A portress enters the hall and makes the following announcement. Sire, there stands at the gate a Chandal maiden from the south, a royal glory of the race that Trikamku who climbed the sky but fell from it at the order of wrathful Indra. She bears a parrot in a cage and bids me thus hail your majesty. Sire, thou, like the ocean, art alone worthy to receive the treasures of the whole earth. In the thought that this bird is a marvel and the treasure of the whole earth, I bring it to lay at thy feet and desire to behold thee. Thou, O king, hast heard her message and must decide. So saying, she ended her speech. The king, whose curiosity was aroused, looked at the chiefs around him and with the words, Why not? Bid her enter, gave his permission. Then the portress, immediately on the king's order, ushered in the Chandal maiden, and she entered. The king and the chieftains did not at first take notice of her. To attract attention, she struck a bamboo on the mosaic floor to arouse the king. Bana then proceeds to describe her personal appearance. Then the king, with the words, Look yonder, to his suit, gazed steadily upon the Chandal maiden as she was pointed out by the portress. Before her went a man whose hair was hoary with age, whose eyes were the color of the red lotus, whose joints, despite the loss of youth, were firm from incessant labor, whose form, though that of a matang, was not to be despised, and who wore the white raiment meet for a coat. Behind her went a Chandal boy, with locks falling on either shoulder, bearing a cage, the bars of which, though of gold, shone like emerald from the reflection of the parrot's plumage. She herself seemed by the darkness of her hue to imitate Krishna when he guilefully assumed a woman's attire to take away the unrenit seized by the demons. She was, as it were, a doll of sapphire walking alone, and over the bind garment, which reached to her ankle, there fell a veil of red silk, like evening sunshine falling on blue lotuses. The circle of her cheek was whitened by the ear ring that hung from one ear, like the ace of night inlaid with the rails, rays of the rising moon. She had a tawny tilak of Gorkana, as if it were a third eye, like Parvati in a mountaineer's attire after the fashion of the garb of Shiva. She was like Shri, darkened by the sapphire glory of Narayan reflected on the robe on her breast, or like Rati, stained by smoke which rose as Madana was burnt by the fire of the wrathful Shiva, or like Yamuna, fleeing in fear of being drawn among by the plowshare of wild Balaram, or from the rich lac that turned her lotus feet into budding shoots, like Durga with her feet crimsoned by the blood of the Asura Mahishas she had just trampled upon. Her nails were rosy from the pink glow of her fingers. The mosaic pavement seemed too hard for her touch, and she came for placing her feet like tender twigs upon the ground. The rays of her anklets rising in flame color seemed to encircle her as with the arms of Agni, as though by his love for her beauty he would purify the stain of her birth and so set the Creator at naught. Her girdle was like the stars wreathed on the brow of the elephant of love, and her necklace was a rope of large bright pearls, like the stream of Ganga just changed by Yamuna. Like autumn, she opened her lotus eyes. Like the rainy season, she had cloudy tresses. Like the circle of the Malaya hills, she was wreathed with sandal. Like the zodiac, she was decked with starry gems. Like Shri, she had the fairness of a lotus in her hand. Like a swoon, she enters the heart. Like a forest, she was endowed with living beauty. Like the child of a goddess, she was claimed by no tribe. Like sleep, she charmed the eyes, as a lotus pool in a wood is troubled by elephants. So was she dimmed by her matang birth, like spirit she might not be touched by. Like a letter, she gladdened the eyes alone, like the blossoms of spring she lacked the jati flower. Her slender waist, like the line of love's bow, could be spanned by the hands. With her curly hair, she was like the Lakshmi of the Yaksha king in Alaka. She had but reached the flower of her youth and was beautiful exceedingly. And the king was amazed, and the thought arose in his mind, ill placed was the labor of the Creator in producing this beauty. For if she had been created as though in the mockery of her Chandal form, such that all the world's wealth of loveliness is laughed to scorn by her own, why was she born in a race with which none can mate? Surely by thought alone did Prajapati create her, fearing the penalties of contact with the Matang race. Else, whence this unsullied radiance, a grace that belongs not to limbs sullied by touch? Moreover, though fair in form by the baseness of her birth, whereby she, like Lakshmi of the lower world, is a perpetual reproach to the gods, she, lovely as she is, causes fear in Brahma, the maker of so strange a union. While the king was thus thinking, the maiden, garlanded with flowers that fell over her ears, bowed herself before him with a confidence beyond her years. And when she made her reverence and stepped on the mosaic floor, her attendant, taking the parrot, it had just entered the cage, advanced a few steps, and showing it to the king, said, "Sire, this parrot by name Vaikampayana knows the meaning of all the Shastras, is expert in the practice of royal policy, skilled in tales, history, and Purans, and acquainted with songs and with musical intervals. He recites and himself composes graceful and incomparable modern romances, love stories, plays, and poems, and the like. He is versed in witticisms and is an unrivaled discipline of the veena, flute, and drum. He is skilled in displaying the different movements of dancing, dexterous in painting, very bold in play, ready in resources to calm a maiden angered in a lover's quarrel, and familiar with the characteristics of elephants, horses, men, and women. He is the gem of the whole earth, and in the thought that treasures belong to thee as pearls to the ocean. The daughter of my lord has brought him hither to thy feet, O king, let him be accepted as thine. On reading this description of a Chandal girl, many questions arise. Firstly, how different it is from the description given by Fahyan. Secondly, Bana is a Vatsyayana Brahmin. This Vatsyayana Brahmin, after giving a description of the Chandal settlement, finds no compunction in using such eloquent and gorgeous language to describe the Chandal girl. Is this description compatible with the sentiments of utter scorn and contempt associated with untouchability? If the Chandals were untouchable, how could an untouchable girl enter the king's palace? How could an untouchable be described in the supreme terms as has been used by Bana? Far from being degraded, the Chandals of Bana's period had ruling families among them. For Bana speaks to the Chandal girl as a Chandal princess. Bana wrote sometime about 600 AD, and by 600 AD, the Chandals had not come to be regarded as untouchables. It is therefore quite possible that the conditions described by Fahyan, though bordering on untouchability, may not be taken as amounting to untouchability. It may only be an extreme form of impurity practiced by the Brahmins who are always in the habit of indulging in overdoing their part in sacerdotalism. This has become more than plausible if we remember that when Fahyan came to India, it was the reign of the Gupta kings. The Gupta kings were patrons of Brahmanism. It was a period of the triumphant revival of Brahmanism. It is quite possible that what Fahyan describes is not untouchability, but an extremity to which the Brahmins were prepared to carry the ceremonial impurity which had become attached to some community, particularly to the Chandals. The next Chinese traveler who came into India was Yuan Chuang. He came to India in 629 AD and he stayed in India for 16 years and has left most accurate records of journeys up and down the country and of the manners and customs of the people. In the course of his description of general characters of the cities and buildings of India, he says, as to their inhabited towns and cities, the quadrangular walls of the cities, or according to one text of the various regions, are broad and high, while the thoroughfares are narrow, tortuous passages. The shops are on the highways and booths or inns line the roads. Butchers, fishermen, public performers, executioners, and scavengers have their habitations marked by a distinguishing sign. They are forced to live outside the city and they sleep along on the left when going around in the hamlets. The above passage is too short and too brief for founding a definite conclusion thereon. There is, however, one point about it which is worthy of note. Fahyan's description refers to the Chandals only, while the description given by Yuan Chuang applies to communities other than the Chandals. This is a point of great importance. No such argument can be leveled against the acceptance of a description since it applies to communities other than the Chandals. It is therefore just possible that when Yuan Chuang came to India, untouchability had emerged. On the basis of what has been said above, we can conclude that while untouchability did not exist in 200 AD, it had emerged by 600 AD. These are the two limits upper and lower for determining the birth of untouchability. Can we fix an approximate date for the birth of untouchability? I think we can. If we take beef eating, which is the root of untouchability, as the point to start from. Taking the ban on beef eating as a point to reconnoiter from, it follows that the date of the birth of untouchability must be intimately connected with the ban on cow killing and on eating beef. If we can answer when cow killing became an offense and beef eating became a sin, we can fix an approximate date for the birth of untouchability. When did cow killing become an offense? We know that Manu did not prohibit the killing or eating of a cow, and he did not make cow killing an offense. When did it become an offense? As has been shown by Dr BR Ambedkar, cow killing was made a capital offense by the Gupta kings sometime in the 4th century AD. We can therefore say with some confidence that untouchability was born sometime between about 400 AD. It is born out of the struggle for supremacy between Buddhism and Brahmanism, which has so completely molded the history of India and the study of which is so woefully neglected by students of Indian history. The end.